Hi, Shubham. Welcome to this debriefing session. First of all, congratulations. 750 is phenomenal. And given that you started at a 720, 720 was the score that you came to us with, and then reached a 750, first of all, shows that determination that you had to succeed. 720 is not a very bad score in itself. You had a Q49, V39, again, not really bad scores. Definitely needed that push for a 750, but very good score to begin with. And you persisted till you got a 750. There were a couple of roadblocks. I think 710 in between on the actual test, 680 on a mock. And despite that, you were persistent. And I think that was one of the biggest qualities that you had, that we kept discussing on your journey to 750. So good job there, and congratulations on that 750 score.
Thanks, Aditi. I think it would not have been possible without eGMAT and your support as well, especially since 720 really brought me down and I wanted to really push for that higher score. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, I'm glad I could be a part of your journey though. And every once in a while, you work with students who are so diligent, and it just, ensures that everything that you're telling, it builds your confidence as well. So as a mentor, even I was very confident when I would recommend something to you, and I knew you were going to follow it through and through, and you're going to come back with the right insights. You're not cutting corners. So that is very helpful for us as mentors as well. So that's great. Let's begin your journey. Um, Tell us more about your what happened when in your 720 attempt. What was your score breakup, and how did you feel after that attempt? What was it that you were going to work on?
So actually, I started studying for GMAT back in August 2020, but it was not really consistent. On weekdays, I would like get maybe half an hour to study, then weekends also maybe 2 or 3 hours. But I was studying like all over the place. It was all over the place, nothing systematic. And then only it was in February or March that I realized that I've been studying for the past 6 months, but there's not a target GMAT date in sight. And that's when I just went ahead and booked a date for June. And yeah, so then the booking of the date was more like an attempt to like finish off things rather than me being confident about taking the exam. So when I took this first attempt, after the scores flashed on my screen, I was kind of hoping a higher score, not like a 720. But then at the same time, I knew that I had not prepared that well, that I should be hoping for a higher score. So when I got that Q49, V39, I knew that I had to work on verbal, because that was one of the areas that I always face difficulties in, especially my CR, because I don't know how I was getting questions right or how I was getting them wrong, but I just went with my instinct. So usually in CR, what used to happen is the moment I used to read the question statement, then I would just jump into the answer choices, go through the first one, then it sounded right, then the second one also sounded right. In the end, I wouldn't narrow down and then just get confused and just pick one of the answer choices. So even though my CR breakdown in my ESR shows that it's a 84th percentile in the 720 attempt, but I really don't know how I got that. Um, but yeah, that's how it was. I was like clueless in verbal mostly.
So I would at this point like to interject and tell everybody who's going to be watching this video. This was a very curious case with his ESR, because, and I will give him props for this, for knowing that CR was the weak area, despite CR being at the 84th percentile, and RC actually at a lower percentile. And when we were reviewing the ESR, we would have gone with the assumption that RC is the weakness. But then Shubham was very keenly aware that no, RC I can still manage if I have the time. It's the CR questions where I did not have the time, where I take more time. Sorry, I take more time, and I'm not even confident. So that 84th percentile, though, was a high percentile score. The confidence that you had in that score was low, and you were taking longer. You were taking over 2 minutes to solve one CR question, right? So then, yes, then in our journey, then we took an ability quiz to identify. So I think that kind of told you as well where you were weak, right? So tell us about that.
So the day I enrolled into the course, you had asked me to take the ability quizzes in verbal as well as quant. And then through the ability quizzes, we got to know that CR is actually a weak point for me. And then we started off with CR, with the pre-thinking and the course based on pre-thinking. And I think earlier it was in the initial phases, it was quite difficult for me to kind of understand the gist of pre-thinking or to apply it. But then once I got the hang of it after solving a few questions, I think it worked wonders. And then I slowly got to understand how to approach a CR question. Earlier, I used to just blindly go into the question, but now I knew I like had a weapon with me, like how to exactly break it down and then kind of analyze the passage and not get confused by the five choices are there. So I think the entire pre-thinking approach taught me how to exactly pinpoint the answer without getting deviated by the out of scope or the incorrect choices. So that was really kind of a boost for me, I would say, because it helped to cut down my timing, which I could use in the other sections basically. So
Right.
yeah, I think the CR pre-thinking approach like was really great for me.
I am glad. And another thing that I remember from your journey that you did really well was maintaining or doing that strategic review, doing a causal review to identify why you made those mistakes, logging them properly in your error log, and may, putting right reasons and not just dismissing questions very easily. You were very particular about your error log, and every time you sent that over, I mean, I could see the effort that you had put in reviewing those. So I think that was another key point, where you were very particular about the review part, the causal review, the strategic review, as we call it. So, to identify your mistakes, it kind of helped work through your errors as well, along with the course. So, yes, I'm glad pre-thinking worked wonders for you. A lot of students kind of, just stop there. When they find pre-thinking difficult, they just leave it there. But going, taking that extra step, putting in that faith in the process definitely helps. So I'm glad you did that, and we could see the results in your second test. Before we move to your second test, you did work a bit on quant as well from your first test. You had a Q49. We were aiming for a Q50, 51. Realistic was 50, ideal was 51, what we were working towards. So tell us about your journey from the first test in quant.
Quant came more naturally to me than verbal, but there were some areas that were exposed during the test. Then when we saw the ESR, we got to know it was mainly geometry and word problems. So when we took the ability quizzes as well, I scored quite low in those two areas compared to the others. And that's when you came up with the step-by-step plan on how to tackle quant, where we started off with the concept files, going on to the practice questions and taking some more quizzes and tests in them. And I think that really helped to pinpoint the weak areas and then work on them instead of just generally working towards quant as a whole.
Right.
So yeah,
So on quant, there were two levels, right? I mean, one was ability quiz first to confirm the hypothesis that I had from the ESR about your geometry and word problems. When you took those ability quiz, we were able to identify the specific topics that came up, right? And from those, when you went to those modules, and when I was also reviewing your account, I could see that you had taken that concept module level diagnostic test. The xPERT AI then told you which files to study, which files to skip. So that kind of made this process faster, considering that you had already booked a test in 2 weeks. When you had joined us, you already had the next date also in hand, and then you wanted to take the test in 2 weeks. Time was very critical for us at that point. So identifying the exact areas of improvement and then working through it most efficiently was the plan, right? I mean, we had very little time till your second test. So that the feedback from expert AI on which files you should skip, which files you should do, was very helpful, and for you to complete as much as you could before the second test.
right.
And I think you worked also through the DS questions from Quant Basics course for getting a hang of how to solve DS questions. Not very much of a weakness for you, but definitely you were losing points in DS earlier in the first test, right? So then tell us about the second test, because this was one of the roadblocks that you had through the way. So what
Yeah.
happened in the 710 test?
So right after the 720 attempt, I immediately went home and booked the test for the next after 16 days. But then I hadn't thought of joining eGMAT at all. I was like, maybe I'll just do more questions and then it'll be all right. It'll come naturally. Then that's when I'll take the second test. And I was like, I would be done in 16 days. And that's when I realized that I asked myself a question, what would I be doing differently than my first attempt? Then I realized that I don't have an answer for that. I would just be literally solving more questions, but that doesn't just cut. So although I booked the test, but I still decided to go for the course. And then our initial thought was that we'll try to get as much as possible done in these 15, 16 days, but we'll still have a third attempt to look forward to in case we do not or are not able to do it in this attempt. So although I was not very, so I would say I was not very bent on that I need to get like a 760 in the second attempt itself. I knew a third attempt might be necessary, especially since I had just rushed into the 710 attempt. But in the 710 attempt, I realized I was much more comfortable with CR, since that was one module that we had gone through in those 15 days. As well as for my quant, I got a Q50 in the second attempt because we had worked on those geometry and word problem areas, which did show some improvement in my second ESR as well. I think the major blunder that I committed in the 710 attempt was overthinking my quant performance. So I gave my quant first, and then while I was doing quant, I started facing like really easy questions. Then that's when I realized, oh no, I've messed this up totally. And then after quant was done, I had to go into verbal. And then during verbal, at the back of my head, I was just like, I already messed up quant. I hardly can make it up for the messed up marks in verbal. So I was like, let's just get done with this. And then
And then tell us your score. Then tell us your score of that 710 score
yeah, and
breakup.
then it came out 710, a Q50, and then a
And imagine that.
B37, which was like 2 points lower than my 720 attempt. So that like really hit me hard. I'm like, I need to really stop overthinking this.
Exactly.
But one major improvement we noticed from my ESR was that CR, although it had stayed on that 84 percentile, I had almost cut down the timing by like 30
Right.
seconds or so.
Yes. Yes, you had. I think there's a very big learning point here, right? I mean, no matter how your test is going, take it one question at a time and subsection, I mean, one section at a time. Once quant is done, you be done with it and still give it your best on verbal. That thought that lingers kind of can mess up your next section, why, even though it may not be necessary. Like in your case, you kind of nailed quant, you had a Q50, and which is very great. You probably had a few mistakes here and there, but not something so major to worry about. But your verbal was definitely a shocker. And when you told me about your V36, I was very surprised. I was actually mildly heartbroken like that, you went from a V39 to V36, despite that being a major area of focus, working through CR. But I was very happy to see the confidence level that you had in your CR score, the confidence that I had in your CR score, because I knew that you can replicate this performance now. Even though your score kind of remained the same, you could replicate an 84th percentile again without me having to worry about it, or you having to even second guess yourself there, did I do it right, because you were more confident. Timing definitely helped. It helped in your RC score, though your SC and CR were weaker after the second test compared to your first test, but that time helped you in your RC.
Another thing I was looking for was the boldface question during my second
I
attempt at
remember,
verbal.
yes.
So there is this myth that if you get the boldface question, you're doing really well. And then I kept searching for it, then it never came. So that even broke me down after the
Right.
test. I'm like, I've not got that level. Yeah,
Mm. But then every time you stumble, you also learn. So we learned from this test. Then quant was more or less set for you. I remember we still worked through a few kinks that were there in geometry and everything to ensure that you can maintain that Q50 performance, right? But again, major focus was still verbal. Verbal was where we had to put in all our effort and everything. So yes, tell us about the third round before the third test. This was also quite a long, it was actually a longer journey than we had anticipated,
right.
but a very fruitful one.
Yeah.
So
So for the third round, I think we were sorted for CR. So we were like, okay, let's now jump onto our SC and RC where we need more work. So in SC and RC as well, you had that detailed step-by-step plan where you told me exactly which modules to take and how exactly to proceed. But then after the 710 attempt, when I gave the Sigma X mocks, if you see the trend, I went from 710 to 680. But the reason for this, which I firmly believe after my 750 attempt, was the mindset. I was always, even after the 710 attempt, I did not learn from my mistake. I would say I was still focusing on the earlier questions that I thought I had got wrong. So in that thought process, I kept messing up the questions at hand. And then when I saw my error log, all were like careless mistakes or read question wrongly, did not see the answer statement. that's when it hit me after 680 that there's something really going on wrong in my approach to the entire
Right.
question. Yeah. And then even our tests and our quizzes showed that it was not something that I did not know. It was just that it was the silly
Mm.
mistakes, as we call it, or the careless mistakes that I was making, which was pulling my score down.
Right. I think before we move to realizing that bit before your 680 in SC from your error log, again, I would, reiterate how important your error log was and how good you were at keeping it, because if you had not maintained that error log to the effect that you had, to the details that you had mentioned, it would have been very difficult for any of us to pull that insights out, like, why are you making those mistakes? In SC, it was more meaning related. Again, you didn't, it was not like you did not know the concept, you did not know the grammar rules, you knew it, but it was about meaning and how to understand. Either you were not understanding the meaning or you were not taking it forward basically to evaluate answer choices. So the answer choices had a meaning that was completely different. So meaning was the important part. Again, not so much the grammar rules, not so much the concepts, but the meaning part. I think that we worked through master comprehension and specific SC modules. And obviously, the 680 score was a very big shock for me as well. And I was also wondering, like, what happened and, what do we do now? But I think your review again told us that it was not knowing things. And the fact that you were doing that review and that the review framework was also very powerful to tell us where you're faltering. And then your reviewing, the way you reviewed the test also kind of told us that, it's not so much of conceptual gaps, it's not so much anything else, but you needing to focus. So even though a 680 on the face of it was, very heartbreaking going from 720, given that you started at 720, but then we knew, given your performance on Scholaranium, given how you had, fed so far, we knew that that is not your true ability, right? I mean, it was one of the stumbling blocks for us, but it was not necessarily a true representation of your ability. So we knew that, like you pointed out, when you reviewed, you realized it was more, careless mistakes, and avoiding that or not being able to avoid that can make or break your performance, right? So tell me, how did you feel after that 680, and how did you, boost yourself up to actually go and, still be at it and not get so demotivated that you just suddenly start believing that is your ability?
Yeah, firstly, I would like to talk about the error log that you mentioned, right?
Hmm.
Until joining eGMAT, I had not maintained a single error log. So I did not know what I was doing wrong, what I was doing right. So one major takeaway from eGMAT's course was maintaining an error log, and that too a detailed one with exact categories of questions that you're getting wrong. I think that was a very important strategy that helped me improve my score. And then coming to the 680, after that 680 Sigma mock, I was like devastated. I had almost given up. I was like, let's just book a test in 16 days and then we'll see. Maybe it's my last attempt and then I'll just get done over with it. We'll keep the 720 attempt and that would be it. Then my parents and my sibling is like, you have already spent 1 year. So why not make it more fruitful by putting in an extra effort, focusing on things and getting that score that you want, right? You do not want to just spend one year and then you end up getting that 720 or something that you do not want. So then I was like, okay, I really need to do something about it. And then that's when I started to exactly focus on the questions at hand. And also a change that we did after my second attempt was to change the order of the sections. So I felt that verbal was something that required me to be more aware and more focused. So that's when I decided to kind of give verbal first and then go on to quant. Because quant, I feel I was able to do even after getting exhausted in verbal. So then we tried out that strategy and it worked well on some of the tests as well and the quizzes that we took. And then slowly and steadily, we saw that my scores went back up. And then just before that 750 attempt, we had taken two GMAT prep mocks where I had got like a 717 both. Although there were like a few repeats because I'd reset them, but at least I knew that I'm on the right track because I did not recollect any of the questions. It was just vaguely familiar. So I was like, okay, now I have to just keep with this. And then that's when we gave my last Sigma X mock, in which I got the exact 750, the exact score. just 2 days before with Q50 as well. And then there was a V41. And then that's when I was like, okay, I'm ready to take the test. I'm probably at the peak of my performance. And then I then contacted you as well. And then you suggested we take the test as well.
Right. I think, yes, it has, a lot of learnings through your journey. And I'm so glad you did not give up. It's very easy, easy to start believing that maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe, this is it kind of a thing. But if you persist, you can get to your target score. And I'm so glad you did, because the 750 clearly is what, will put you in whatever school you want. You can decide for yourself, you can build an application around it. So I'm very glad you did that. And you know through the course there were so many points for us to be able to personalize your learning. So that was again something that was very helpful. And I think this is great. Your journey has been very, very good and very fruitful, even as a mentor for me. you know like I said, when you have somebody who's very diligent, who's I knew that if it's been 3 days, I'm going to get at least one email from Shubham updating me about his progress, because he would have done what I've asked him to do. So even I would look forward to your emails, and to see what is it that, how much of it you've been able to do, how much not, where do we need to iterate and change the plans. And obviously system would give me that means to do that for you, because I could see the data there. And your error logs are phenomenal. So good job on that. And I hope everybody who sees this interview realizes and understands from this that maintaining a good error log can be the key to your good performance. There are obviously so many things that we tried along the way, switching sections of during the test, and different weaknesses that keep coming about every time we took another test. So all of that worked really well, and I'm really glad that you got to the score that you wanted to. So if you had to take tell fellow EG matters the three things that they should remember when they're studying, and 3 points that, just three things that will just help them ace the test, what would they be?
First would be, of course, the error log, because I think I wasted 6 months of my GMAT preparation not knowing what to do. But if I had an error log, probably I would have pointed out that I'm weak in these particular sections and then had a better understanding of where I need to improve. So one is definitely maintain an error log, and that to a detailed one, not just for the sake of it. Just like the eGMAT approach that we take, right? You categorize each of your errors that you make into different categories. Then you explain what you could have done better or where you faltered, as well as the solution, how you can learn from it. So one is the error log. Then secondly is, I think personally for me, since I was weak at CR, I think the pre-thinking approach was magical, I would say, because it kind of helps you understand the gap in the logic of the argument, and then quickly, without wasting time or getting distracted by the other answer choices, quickly helps you to point out the right answers. So I think pre-thinking in CR, as well as the meaning-based approach in SC as well, I think that also went a long way in helping me tackle some of the 700 plus questions as well. Since after the 700 level, I think all those meaning based questions come and you have to tackle them. And RC also, I found it useful, especially the pausing, where to pause during RC, what to take note of, the passage summaries, all that was helpful. And the third point I would say is definitely focus on the question at hand. Do not think about what you have just done, and do not try to predict what GMAT is trying to, what the difficulty of the questions, and trying to outsmart the system by some way, or trying to think that, oh, if I get a bold-faced question, I'm doing well. Because if I talk about my GMAT prep mocks that I took, I did not get a single bold-faced questions, and I got a V44 and V45. So it broke that myth right there. Although in my actual 750 attempt, I did get a bold-faced question, the second last one. So that like boosted my confidence.
you
But
still you
one,
still went with that
yeah.
within your mind, like this is a reassurance that this is going well.
Actually, I was running out of time, and then the second last question was a bold face. Then I was like, I'm set. This is done. So yeah, the third thing was definitely focus at the question you're doing. Do not think
Yeah.
about anything else. Yeah.
I think that is very, very helpful. And there are a lot of learning points that you've spoken about, and I'm sure if anybody who watches this video focuses through these things, they'll benefit in their journey. You definitely did, and it was extremely humbling and extremely pleasant experience working with you, Shubham. Not just me, even Karan, when I told him that you have a 750 score now, even he was very happy for you, and all the other team members who've interacted with you through some medium or another, they were very, very happy with your score. And we hope that you get to whatever school that you dream of and you want to. And I know you're looking at applying in some years, so you do have the time to build your profile accordingly. And your 750 is going to go a long way in ensuring that you don't miss out on those colleges. So all the best, Shubham. It was great working with you, and I hope you get everything that you dream of in your life.
Thank you, Aditi, and thank you to the entire eGMAT team for putting up such a fantastic course, as well as keeping it so updated with the questions are especially very, very GMAT like, and my Sigma X mocks that I gave were like exactly predicting where I was. So in both of my attempts, I got the exact score one day before what I actually got on the test. So everything is accurate also. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shubham.